And we are the Coalition, loud and proud, outrage porn-free, civilly disobedient media broadcasting live on the Worldwide Coalition Network here at the Go Local Live Broadcast Center, deep in the heart of the city we love, Providence, Rhode Island. Facebook.com/The Coalition Radio, on the mighty Twitter at Coalition_radio, and of course the mothership, CoalitionRadio.us, where across the headlines you can see links to our new Spreaker and ultimately Spotify podcast page, as well as our good old YouTube page, where we've got a couple of hundred videos of thought leaders like the young woman I'm about to introduce, joining us both from our AM radio days and now here on digital video, talking about issues that, well, we call third rail issues because really no one else wants to talk about it. One of our missions here at the Coalition is to bring on board, given the time constraints that these folks have, some of the best emerging writers on what I'll call the liberty scene. And when I say liberty scene, now that's not to preclude people of really any political discipline, any political affiliation to come and join us and listen. Because the whole point of the show is to have folks who can focus on, well, individual reporting, writing, the art of writing. This is a nation that sadly is very short of great writing these days. Magazines, the old ones that used to matter, the New Yorker, Times, Newsweek, and then all the other literary magazines presented people with an opportunity to read great writing. Nowadays, it's all about what can fit in a single page on a website and what's going to elicit the most clicks. Our mission is to have you do nothing less than replace the MSN.coms and the Yahoo.coms and the nonsense that you see out there with organizations like AIER, with the Goldwater Institute, with Heritage's page, with the FIRE, which is a preeminent force in free speech on campus, and now, of course, Fee.org, which is the Foundation for Economic Education. Joining me for the very first time, I'm going to read directly from her description, is Brittany Hunter. Brittany is a senior writer for the Foundation for Economic Education. Additionally, she is a co-host, and next time you're on, we're going to talk about this, Beltway Banthas, a podcast that combines Star Wars... Star Wars and politics, huh? Her work stands out primarily because she is so diverse and has included everything from reviewing Jay-Z's latest album through an economic lens to live blocking each chapter of F.A. Hayek's Road to Serfdom. In addition to providing regular content to Fee, Stand Together, and the Center for Individualism, Brittany's work has appeared in Business Insider, Zero Hedge, okay, that's bleeding edge, Newsweek, Real Clear Markets, and of course, the Mises Wire. And we are big fans of Mises, both as a body of work and the organization, the Mises Caucus, that has emerged so provocatively, if you will, from sort of the rubble of the Libertarian Party. Brittany Hunter, welcome to the Coalition for the very first time. You honor us by joining us on a busy Friday night. We've only got you for about 25 minutes or so. So we provided a link to her page, if you will, and the think tank / journalistic sites like Fee, the way that they organize is a little bit differently because they not only present ongoing work on the homepage, but what's great is if there's an individual author that you become a fan of, like I am now of Brittany's work, you click on her page and there will be in order, most recent popping up first, all of her collective work. So you can literally just go through it, and as we all wonder sometimes, we all worry about when we commit to either the spoken word or the written word, you can go back and check exactly whether we were right or wrong. But Brittany's work encompasses dozens of issues. The thing that we wanted to focus tonight was an article that really brought her to my attention, and that is, of course, her a killer discussion, if you will, of former Vice President Biden's attempt to become president. And my terms, not hers, sort of the whitewashing, if you will, of what is a really troubling record prior to him becoming good old friendly, crazy, a little bit too touchy-feely Uncle Joe. Listen, Brittany, welcome to the Coalition. Give us just a little bit about your background and how did someone like yourself, a talent like yourself, end up, occupying part of the liberty spectrum? Was there a moment in school or your background?
Ooh, it's kind of hard to pinpoint. Also, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. But yeah, it was kind of a bunch of little things that kind of eventually led to me realizing that I was a libertarian. And I think the biggest thing is I was in college about to graduate when the housing crisis happened. Yikes. And that was huge for me. I think a lot of people my age feel the same way, where we went from not really caring about the economy to wanting to know as much as we possibly could because this terrible thing was happening.
Right.
So I think that is one of the biggest things, and that also coincided with the rise of Ron Paul, which is how I kind of got into this movement. And so that was how I got to D.C. I was doing campaigning for him, and then eventually made my way up here.
Wow. So let me ask you a question I ask of all Ron Paul devotees. His treatment by the Republican Party, particularly at the Republican National Convention and at the hands of one of my favorite people, and I'm using the coalition air quotes, Willard Mitt Romney, as we know him.
Yes.
Did that have any impact on you going libertarian as opposed to perhaps staying or finding a home in the Republican Party?
Yeah, it's interesting you bring up Romney because I'm from Utah. I'm a Utah girl. And so it was a really hard thing to be a Ron Paul supporter in Utah in 2012. So that was kind of an interesting, it was almost a little bit of an act of rebellion on my part.
Oh, I'm sure.
But it was just one of those things it just made sense. Everything he was saying resonated with me, and so I couldn't really, look away. And it was the first person who ever got me excited about politics and economics.
And was there a particular part of the Ron Paul message that kind of hooked you?
Yeah, I think I was actually, it's silly to say the end the Fed, because that was a big thing we chanted back in the day. But as somebody who didn't know originally why the housing crisis came to be or the role the Federal Reserve played in it and artificially, lowering interest rates, things like that, he got me into economics in a way no one else ever would. I would have never found the Mises Institute. I would have never found FEE if not for Ron Paul getting me interested in economics. So definitely the economic side of things.
Right, and I believe in my heart of hearts, the willingness of folks in the liberty movement, particularly folks who have sort of spun out of the Ron Paul revolution, to embrace economics, the study of economics, and understanding of how economics works, I think is the single biggest differentiator. Not just the philosophy, but actually taking and investing the time to understand how markets work, the importance of free markets, what free markets can do to rise up folks of, any generation, any racial, ethnic, sexual background, whatever. It's the power of the free market, which is in such high disdain, particularly in your generation, it can be revelatory, to be blunt. So it's when I see, and to me you're a young person, so that's just how you're always going to be.
I'm okay with that.
Okay. As a young person, then reaching out and looking, as your bio mentions, and looking at the popular culture and any one of a number of events, exogenous events, as the economists like to call them, through the prism of liberty and freedom is highly compelling because it requires an intellectual freedom and a capacity to think critically that, quite frankly, is no longer the emphasis of our education system. Now, you wrote...
No, yeah, absolutely.
Right. So if you read the article at first blush, I'm not feeling a lot of love for gentle Uncle Joe. I mean, we see, and particularly young people now see, this guy Joe Biden as the silver fox. Yikes! Let me rethink that one. This sort of patrician-like political figure, who speaks in nothing but love and perversely diatribes against Trump. What is this gentleman's background, and what dragged you to him?
Yeah, it's not good. What actually dragged me to him is I'm very involved in underground music, which is kind of known as like dance parties or raves. The reason I came across Joe Biden's bad history is because I stumbled across an article that Joe Biden banned these raves, these dance parties from happening in the 90s, or trying to, because he tried to assert that the only things going on there were drug dealing. So he kind of got his war on drugs launched this way. And that kind of pivoted me into more, because I was curious, as I was seeing a lot of my leftist friends supporting him, I wanted to kind of dig in a little bit more. And as it turns out, that was just the tip of the iceberg. In fact, Joe Biden coined the term drug czar before there was ever, a drug czar. So a lot of our current drug war situation was actually, constructed by him. There was a huge article, and I believe it was the New York Times in 1982, where they kind of called him out for this, that he was the strongest advocate at that time for anti-narcotics efforts. So it's funny to see him now pretending to be hip and, like he was an old hippie or something, when that's not the case.
Right. And sentencing issues. I mean, that was particularly damaging, if you will, to the social structure and the family structure of the inner city, wasn't it?
Oh, 100%. I mean, if we look at why we have single-family households or why we have mass incarceration ripping families apart, I mean, that can be tracked almost directly to 1994 to Biden's signature piece of legislation, which was the Violent Crime Control and Law Enforcement Act of 1994. And that was signed into law by President Clinton. But that actually, it banned people from, what was it? So this was the three-strike rule. We've heard about this now. Mm-hmm. I don't know if you guys are familiar with that.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So that was also a Biden thing. And it's funny that even Clinton later apologized for the bill, saying that it made the problem worse. But we haven't really seen Joe Biden apologize, and that gets me.
Right, and I'm thinking we're not going to either at this point.
No.
The old-fashioned term, what was it, mea culpa? A mea culpa would be from an existing first stage top-tier presidential candidate would possibly be one of the most astonishing things I've seen in my lifetime, and yet at the same time, it would be one of the most welcome things. It would indicate a political maturity and a willingness to ask forgiveness for policy just run wildly amok. I'll hold my breath, as the saying used to be. One of the things,
and you're not wrong.
One of the things that folks don't understand, I always use Ferguson as an example, and feel free to jump in and correct me where you disagree. I love to be challenged. The federal government, the Justice Department, issued actually 2 reports on Ferguson. One, of course, the most famous, was the one that it serves as a chronology of the events leading up to mass riots. Less talked about, if you will, is studies that were done on the political and the cultural, if you will, and for lack of a better term, sociological environment that pervaded Ferguson and its environs in the run-up to what we now know as the Ferguson riots. Ferguson, politically and socially, and this is emblematic of so many inner-city communities, was literally a tinderbox. It was waiting for some type of event, and let's not even debate the event itself. As history moves on, the actual event becomes less and less important than the culture surrounding the event. What in your opinion, has 3 strikes you're out, broken glass, stop and frisk, what has that done to the culture of any inner city America?
And I'm actually going to use a different example. So my earliest memories are of the LA riots. I grew up in LA. I was 7 years old, I believe, when they happened.
Wow.
But similar situation where you had police brutality end up in riots. And I believe, remind me what your specific question was, just how it's impacted inner cities.
Yeah. In other words, I mean, there's still a law and order element out there that says arrest everybody, send in the tanks. It's funny because if the Trumpers understood that Joe Biden was the genesis of much of the current thinking on law and order enforcement and the war on drugs, they would probably each have a collective nervous breakdown. But what impact on community's culture does this type of warlord-like policing have, from your experience and from your reading?
Yeah, it's destructive completely. I mean, I remember at that young age even seeing that was before police using tanks was widespread. But we saw that. We saw people armed. Police wasn't even just police. We saw the National Guard on our corner, with guns. But it gave you a feeling that you had no freedom, and that they didn't care if you had freedom. This is as close to feeling like an animal that I think anyone has ever felt, and I'm only speaking specifically for what I experienced during the LA riots.
Right.
But it was, you had these cities destroyed, and then you look back at who's destroying them and who's creating these legislations, and like you said, it's people like Joe Biden, it was people like Bill Clinton. And so it's always been just kind of appalling to me that so many on the left who also live in these cities have supported these candidates.
Right.
Because they are the ones responsible for turning their own homes into combat zones.
So how ironic now is that you've got Kamala Harris duking it out with Joe Biden over pointing fingers on who is the most egregious violator of fundamental human rights.
And that was outrageous. Watching that, I don't use Twitter often, and I took to Twitter that night. The only thing to say is the only person less qualified to talk about criminal justice reform than Joe Biden is Kamala Harris, and they just both went back and forth as if they had done these great things, and has yet to be seen.
Why do you think? And the New York Times has made a few stabs at this. And in fact, their timing was interesting a few weeks ago in the run-up to one of the first debates when they sort of knowledge bombed people the day of the debate. It was interesting because I was trying to figure out what their, and I subscribe to the New York Times, full disclosure, but what their message was or what they were trying to accomplish. But largely, Biden's gotten a complete pass on this. In an age of 24-hour journalism, how is that possible?
It's crazy. In 2010, I think that the only comment he made, no, actually, it wasn't even a good comment. In 2010, which really isn't that long ago, he was still clinging to not believing in any legalization for marijuana, which, fast forward 9 years from now, and we are almost at the end of prohibition. Some states are holding on, but we're at the end, and he's still kind of been clinging to that. So I don't see any evidence that Joe Biden has changed. I don't see any evidence that he's going to change. He is your typical old school Democrat, not unlike the Clintons.
Right. And to me, the damage is generational because we see, and I don't know if this is in your beat that much, but the coalition as a show is very active in advancing the cause of decriminalization of sex work. And we've dedicated literally 30 to 40 hours of on-air programming time to interviewing folks who are on the ground floor of fighting for decriminalization. I love your perspective on this. Despite its utter failure on levels that are profound, the very tools and approaches of the war on drugs are being replicated on the war on sex workers and now seems to be, incredibly enough, despite, again, violently destructive impact, seems to be the new MO for the federal government. And that's true of whether you're a Democrat or a Republican. Has the duopoly, can we truly see now the hypocrisy of the duopoly? Because aren't they the same now? And how is this continuing to persist as a tool of government?
It's an interesting topic you bring up because I think we're probably aligned on that. I think, as somebody who believes in the free market and as few regulations as possible, I think the way we protect sex workers is to legalize sex work. And I also know that there's a lot of implications with that as well because it gets tied in with sex trafficking and then you're not protecting the actual sex workers. So I don't know exactly how it ties into the similarities with the war on drugs, but I know it has the same disastrous effect on people who are, for lack of a better term, trying to make a living the best way they know how, right? A lot of these dealers in the 80s were making money the best way they knew how. They had come from nothing, and they were trying to be entrepreneurial. They maybe didn't do what you or I would do, right, if we were trying to be entrepreneurial because they didn't have access to that. And I think the same could be said for sex work.
Now, let's look at the field then in the few minutes we've got left. Much is made of Tulsi Gabbard's anti-war attitude in the libertarian movement and the freedom movement, that somehow she's the one, quote-unquote, good Democrat. Is there any candidate, though, across the spectrum, the Democratic spectrum primarily, the handful of opposition that exists for Donald Trump, is there any candidate that you can point to on the spectrum that will actually work to end this madness, as opposed to just give lip service to it?
I like a lot of what Tulsi Gabbard says. That does not mean to say that I support her or endorse her because there's a lot of economic things she just doesn't understand. But when it comes to the war on drugs, which has, as we talked about, devastated the lives of countless Americans, I think she could do a lot of good there. She's even talked about pardoning Snowden or getting Snowden back and just doing really great stuff on the criminal justice front. That being said, I could not throw my support behind her. But I think I think she's saying the things that need to be said, especially what she said to Kamala Harris in the last debate. So I'm excited to see where she goes.
Right. And the beauty of, by the way, of your article, and a couple of minutes we've got left, you mentioned some of his earliest legislation, but what points out to the Democratic hypocrisy on, again, this portrayal of all Democrats as these being gentle hippie types. I mean, let's talk about the Anti-Drug Abuse Act. I'm going to quote from your article, a mere 5 grams of crack cocaine were subject to the same mandatory minimum as that caught with 500 grams of powdered cocaine. When this was written, First of all, I mean, I don't expect you to know drug prices in that period of time. So I'll simply say that 500 G's of Coke, when that law was written, was one whole hell of a lot of money. Speaking on behalf of a friend. The notion that 5 grams of crack could subject you to the same sentencing guidelines was a grotesque attack on the African American community in their inner city.
Oh yeah, yep. I mean, and not even hiding it. That was a blatant attack.
I mean, do we use the word racism? I
think we should use the word racism because I think that's what it is. If you look at how that epidemic, the crack epidemic, destroyed those neighborhoods. I mean, we could go on this topic forever, but absolutely, that part, Joe Biden will have to pay for that someday because that is a blatantly racist policy that I think has just barely been undone by the First Step Act that just got passed. I think they're just starting to undo the damage of what Biden did.
Right, and so you've left an entire generation of communities broken. You've abetted, if you will, they're being forced to be single parental families. Out here in New England, the term that's most often used is what they call the pipeline to prison. You've just taken that pipeline and you've turned it into a reservoir where you're just draining entire members of the community for selling what should be legal and what should be a consensual act between adults. When I look across the candidates from my perspective, I can't think of an individual on the political spectrum right now, including Donald Trump, whose actions are largely rhetoric. He's done some amazingly abhorrent things, but largely it's rhetoric. But in terms of physical acts, in terms of actual laws, in terms of actual impact on communities, Joe Biden may be the single most destructive candidate on the political scene these days. Your thoughts?
I think that's fairly accurate. I would say followed only by Kamala Harris. I think I think she's just right underneath him. But I think both of them have done a great disservice to the communities they were supposed to serve.
Right. Final question before I give you a chance to plug any work that's coming up. And again, I appreciate you taking some time on a busy Friday. I know you got a lot of commitments tonight.
Of course.
Not only can we not expect an apology, but do you sense that other candidates of a different generation are going to finally levy their guns, if you will, political guns, at Joe Biden? And is there any chance that, the fine Mayor Pete or any of these folks, or are they just going to turtle on this issue because they're afraid to challenge their own political hierarchy?
I think what's going to happen is we're going to see the takedown of Harris first. I think Joe Biden's almost irrelevant to the younger candidates. Maybe not yet, or maybe not for the long term, but for right now. Because I've noticed in that last debate, they were just all getting on Harris. I think that's going to be enemy number one, even though Biden's contributions to the war on drugs are arguably far worse than hers. He's been around longer, and he wrote them. But I think Joe has the Uncle Joe scapegoat. Like, I think he's very lucky that he has I'm just kind of a bumbling fool. I don't mean any harm going for him. But I would like to see that. I would like to see more people hitting him hard on what he's actually done in his career. So I'm hoping. Well,
we're going to reshare your article until literally everyone in America has been forced to read it. We're going to print it out. We're going to paper coffee house walls and other places where liberals tend to congregate until they understand it. Because again, I just see him as an incredibly dangerous figure. The notion that he would rise to the presidency is to me actually more appalling than a Donald Trump presidency. And we've just met, so you don't know what that means. Give us a. How often do you present in Fee, and what are you working on right now? Anything good coming up that you want to tease us with, or?
Yeah. So usually in Fee I write a couple articles a week, but I'm working. My next piece is on about my hometown in Utah. A bunch of kids ran a little entrepreneurial market, and now the state is coming after them to try to collect taxes on their lemonade stands and bake sales. Mm-hmm. So writing kind of about the fight against that and child entrepreneurs. So very excited about that.
Great, and so you'll make sure that I've seen that when that comes out, so we can continue to share your work. I hope you'll join us again in the future. Just give folks a couple of snapshots of where they can find you on social media.
Yes, absolutely. You can find me on social media under the name Brittany Hunter. I'm pretty easy to find. My Twitter handle is Brit_the_wit. And then you can find me on Instagram at Brittany Hunter as well, and then on fee.org.
I'm going to just leave folks with a couple of things that you've written about and just the last couple of weeks. And it's right here on the site. It's an astonishingly easy site to navigate. And again, eliminate CNN.com and bookmark this instead. How one entrepreneur is waging war on poverty in Africa. I'd like to talk about that next time. Home equity theft. How a man's home was seized over $8 in unpaid taxes. How gratitude can rewire your brain for happiness and success. How the gig economy can save a generation drowning in student debt. Again, economics applied to real life applied to politics. That's what we need more of in this, and I congratulate you on your work and your continuing efforts.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you so much.
All right, so again, Brittany Hunter joining us, fee.org. Just do a simple Google. Fee.org, Brittany Hunter. You'll get access to all her work, and it's right there on the web. Join us again soon, I hope. All right, buddy?
I will, anytime. Let me know. Thanks for having me.
All right, we're going to take another quick break now. We are the Coalition, loud and proud, outrage porn-free, civilly disobedient media, broadcasting live on the Worldwide Coalition Network here at the Go Local Live Broadcast Center, deep in the heart of the city we love, Providence, Rhode Island. Facebook.com/The Coalition Radio, on the mighty Twitter at Coalition_radio, and of course, coalitionradio.us. That's the mothership. Links are right there to our YouTube, to our Spreaker podcast page. We'll have a link up to our Spotify page soon. You can get this, shows that go all the way back to 2014. In the next few weeks, we're going to be developing and bringing off our AM signal, some shows that featured presidential debates and candidates' appearances from the Libertarian Party, one of which, John McAfee, you'll find startlingly interesting. We'll just leave it at that. Again, we thank folks who've taken the time to follow us on all social media. It's important to us. It's how we get our word out amongst, well, the white noise that constitutes American media landscape today. As I mentioned, we're in the process of organizing a trip down to the Mexican border to focus on what's going on in a little town called Deming. We'll have that story put up again on our Facebook story page, as well as on the front page of the Coalition. We hope to be traveling next weekend down to the New Mexican border, where we'll be able to see firsthand and observe firsthand what a community can do through the spirit of volunteerism, what a community can do through the spirit of personal responsibility, replacing failed government services with love, with support for folks who are suffering some very, very desperate times. I want to take a moment, of course, to thank our sponsors. We talked about Yacht Club Bottling. Of course, Yacht Club Soda found at yachtclubbottlingworks.com. Take a moment this summer. You're going to spend, well, we got Labor Day just a few weeks from now. You'll spend all sorts of money and time and effort putting on for your family some of your favorite dishes. Don't use the refinery soda. Buy a couple cases of Yacht Club. You can do so at any store and just liquor stores across the state now, as they're supported by the distributor McLaughlin and Moran. You can do so at their family-owned factory store in Centerdale and at bars and restaurants, whether you're looking for mixers, sodas for ice cream floats, and some really new provocative flavors, including a berry watermelon soda that's become one of my favorites, and I'm not usually a sweet soda kind of guy. Daryl Gould was just in with Air Sciences. Air Sciences, mold remediation, and fighting biohazards in your home, your school, your workplace. He's got some innovative products, and he's also got some programs geared to folks who might be suffering from some autoimmune deficiencies that might be a function of chemotherapy and or other invasive diseases. Let him know. Drastic discounts, and of course he's even got a few volunteer efforts he's willing to put forward for people in that situation. Beacon Shipping and Logistics, 1-855-3-SHIP-IT. We're coming up to that time of the year where your daughter or son might be going to college, might be going to grad school, might be moving out to that first job. You've got a family car, maybe a car that you bought on eBay, maybe a car that you've got at a dealership far away. Whatever the reason, professional automobile service, dealership-based shipping and transportation now available for the individual at fair prices, fully insured, a company with international reach based right here in Warwick, Rhode Island. Beacon Shipping and Logistics, 1-855-3-SHIP-IT. So we're going to take a quick break right now for a couple minutes. Well, in the next hour, we're going to move into the Libertarian Hour. Probably going to start a few minutes early. We're going to talk about, well, county and affiliate organizing. To many people, that's not a subject that would be on the tip of their tongue when discussing libertarian politics. If, in fact, as a movement, we are, in fact, to move forward, we need to understand that the focus should be, and the obsession should be, on hyper-local candidates. To do that successfully, we need to follow the model of, well, some of our political friends and opponents. The school board, the Board of Ed, taxpayer boards, town financial meetings, these are the lifeblood of the American body politic. What can we do to organize on a local level to gain greater access so that we can provide another voice to solve and challenge the issues facing American cities across the country? So stay tuned. We'll be back in just a couple minutes. Thanks for listening.